method also. This is a very new and significant election this year because this is the first time ever in 118 years that the City of Whittier has elected councilmen based on where the voters live and based on where the councilpersons live. The candidates who are here tonight all live in Council District 1, which is sort of the southwest part of the city. And eventually, John's going to put a map up there so you can see it. There is the southwest corner of the city. The top boundary is Broadway. Part of the boundary is Painter Avenue. I think it's the eastmost part of the boundary. And then you can see that in order to get it to come out with the equal population that we require when we're doing a district plan, there are some jigs and jogs. The western boundary, however, is the boundary of the city. So it has a lot of jigs and jogs, but that's between city and unincorporated. The District 3 race is scheduled for this election also. District 3, however, which is mostly 90603 and 90605, in that particular race, the incumbent, Kathy Warner, filed, and no one filed against her. In a race where the incumbent is not challenged by anyone, the City Council has the option of placing that single candidate on the ballot or of appointing that candidate to that seat. And in this case, the council at the end of January appointed Kathy Warner to the seat in District 3 for the City of Whittier. So people who live in 90603 and 90605 will not see a candidate for council. They will have only the mayor on their ballot. People who live in 90602 and part of 1, it's kind of where it is in 90606, you people will have not only the District 1 candidates on your ballot, but you will also have the 3 mayoral candidates. Well, there will be 4 candidates' names. You have 3 people running who would seek your vote as mayor of the City of Whittier for a 2-year term. This council term is a 4-year term. Council terms have been historically 4-year terms, and the districts are staggered so that from here on, 2 will be up for election every 2 years. And then the mayor will be up for election at each of those times. I hope that clarifies things a little bit for all of you, and you'll understand why your ballot only has mayor on it, or that your ballot has a council person on it also. The candidates have been told the same rules that the mayoral candidates had. They have an opportunity to give a 3-minute opening statement, a 2-minute closing statement. After the opening statements, we will have questions from our panel, and then we will open it to audience questions. Audience questions should be written, and we still have some ushers who are passing out cards and pencils. If you have a question written, please wave your card so that the ushers can come pick it up. We are screening the questions for clarity. So if our screeners don't know what the question is about, probably the candidates won't know either. For civility, we are not criticizing candidates. We are we are trying to be polite here. The third thing is that these issues should have to do with city government and city governance rather than other levels of government, things that city councilmen can actually deal with. And then we are looking for a variety of topics. If you were here for the mayoral race, you heard that there were a number of issues that the City of Whittier faces that people are interested in. And I know that you will have questions that pertain to the city and to your neighborhood, so please be sure to get those written down and turned in. Thank you. We do have our panel here, and we will hear from them in a few minutes. The candidates are seated in the order in which they drew, so We will hear from the candidates, starting with Robert and ending with Josue, beginning in this section. And at the end of the evening, when we have closing statements, we will do reverse order. So that, and during the question and answer period, I will be switching around who answers first, so that you aren't always following the same person, or always last or something like that. Or maybe you don't like to always be first, who knows? So the first candidate who is running for District 1 City Council seat for the City of Whittier is Robert Canales.
My name is Robert Canales. I was born in the City of Whittier at a small place called Presbyterian Hospital, back when it was just one building. I grew up in the city, in an impoverished family.
Yeah, there's a little button on the front edge of it. Yeah, there you got it.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Better.
Okay, let me start from the beginning. My name is Robert Canales. I was born in the City of Whittier at a little place called Presbyterian Hospital on December 14th, 1973, back when it was just one building. I grew up in Whittier, attended Whittier area schools, graduated Whittier High School in 1992, where I also served on the school site council that represented the fence that you now see around that campus. My dad was a truck driver and a member of the Teamsters. My mother was active in her Catholic church, and she was also active in her party. I attended Rio Hondo College, got a degree in business administration with concentration in accounting and business law. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from Cal State Fullerton, concentration in public administration. And I've served 9 years in the United States military, including 1 year in Iraq. I am the founder and the chairman of the Whittier Area Transgender Association. The reason I am running this year, and I have to say that this is not my first go at the wheel. I have run for city council previously in '94 and '96, and at those times, two of the things I talked about was housing and keeping taxes low or non-existent. And I'm glad to see that the city council currently has done a good job in that. However, there's a few things that they're lacking in. Last year, we started the process of political reform when we approved districts, but that is not the end of the process. We also need term limits. I am the only candidate that has pledged to step down in 2024 after serving 2 terms. My reasons for doing so is because of avoiding groupthink, which happens when you have the same people in the same organization for long periods of time, and to give my neighbors a chance to also serve in the capacity running on an equal and fair playing field. There are some objections to that, like the lack of experience of some of the candidates, but I have to note that there are many people who run for city council who, at the time they win, don't have the knowledge or experience, and the only way to give it to them is to elect them and let them have a chance to get the experience so we can get fresh ideas and new faces. I'm also running on infrastructure and balancing the budget, because we still have a deficit no matter how the current city council spends it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we will hear from David Gonzalez.
Good evening. My name is David Gonzalez. I'm running for City Council. I'm running for District 1. I thank the staff, the volunteer staff, and the leadership for putting this on, and I want to say very simply, I'm about public safety, community, and making sure that Whittier grows. And I came to this point of service by way of a very interesting journey that first started with a single mom who worked and taught me what it means to work hard, what it means to respect family, what it means to obey the law, and to support your community. She showed me with her example the value of serving others. She showed me how to be a proud member of my community, of my family. I'm a very proud member of the policing profession. I'm a very proud member of nonprofit leadership, a very proud member of now teaching, where I get to show young men and women what it means to do the people's business. My entire life has been defined by this idea of bringing community, by doing the people's business, much differentiated from ordinary business. This is not a small calling. It's a great calling, and I take it very, very seriously. And it's not just talk, because I've worked it, I've researched it, I've taught it, I do it. This is a very important time for our city. That is true. We have to ask ourselves, what do we expect from the leader of our district? We want experience, those who have worked with city officials to make things happen. We need to have someone who has led teams, not for any other purpose, but to bring people together and create public value. We need experience in long-term service, people who have served on a consistent basis. Here's what I'm going to do. I will represent you as your city council person on District 1. I will represent you not solely for equal treatment, but fair treatment. That's a differentiation because sometimes things happen and we need a bit more than what is equal. Here's what I'll do. If it has to do with money, I'll fight for it. If we need streetlights, we'll get them. You will know your police department. You will know your police department. This is the kind of leader that I am. And my record is absolutely open to everybody, all my records, to show this.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Josue Alvarado.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Josue Alvarado, and like some of the candidates here today, I also have a long history with Whittier. My family moved into Whittier back in 1988 after the earthquake, and we lived in South Whittier. We always dreamed of the time that we would actually be able to live in the nicer side of Whittier, to cross over to the boulevard. And you know, through a little bit of education and actually getting my degree in business administration from Cal State Fullerton and attending McKibben, South Whittier Junior High, California High School, and finally Rio Hondo, I earned that degree. And in looking back, I really think back that the degree really that I got and the education I invested in myself was the catalyst that, you know, brings me here today. It's only through making sure that we empower ourselves as a community are we able to serve the, you know, people that surround us. My son, you know, was born in Presbyterian Hospital. You know, this is the place we chose as home. When I purchased my first house here in Whittier, I decided that this is where I wanted to raise my son. And hopefully, more children down the way. I think when we look back and, you know, really pick an individual that's going to go ahead and represent, you know, this district of Whittier, the first thing this person needs to be able to promise is absolute, unequivocal representation. The side of Whittier has been neglected for way too long. And all I want to do, whether you're on one party issue or the other, is make sure that your voice is heard. Neighborhood security is also a very top level priority for me. Having a child, and the only candidate with a child in the district, it's important that our streets stay safe. We have a lot of issues that we have to deal with, and District 1 deals with the brunt of the issues when it comes to the homeless issue. So I want to make sure that we also allocate time and resources and really thoughtful energy behind creating affordable housing and a place to put these individuals so they don't have to roam the streets and the alleys that we live in. Better jobs is also a priority. I'm the only candidate with corporate experience that has the experience to manage $32 million budgets and have the background to prove it. When you're dealing with city council issues, you have to allocate resources and make sure you make strategic decisions, something that I take in spades. Want to make sure that, one thing is very clear. I am committed to the city, like many of the candidates that are here today. But one thing that we differ is that we want to make sure that, how we go about it is how we differ as individuals. I think for my approach is that you're going to have someone that's really involved in the city. So you're going to have someone that's actually there and can speak the language of the individuals that live in the city. I'm the only fluent bilingual candidate that speaks fluent English and Spanish. You can't reach out to all the people that live in District 1 without understanding their language. Do I have more time? 15 seconds? Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Josue Alvarado y la única razón que estoy aquí es para asegurarme que nuestro distrito tome el tiempo para al fin tener la representación, la seguridad, mejores trabajos y al fin a llegar a un nivel donde podemos alocar fondos para gente que necesita hogares de buen precio. Gracias.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will have questions directed from our panel, and for these questions, we will have 90 seconds to answer. And we will begin with Mr. Gonzalez, move to Mr. Alvarado, and return to Mr. Canales.
The first question from the league is, and is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What proposals do you have to encourage the residents and the city administration to adopt more environmental programs such as increased water conservation and use of renewable energy?
It's absolutely important that we take our environment into consideration. Here's where I wanted to start. We have an event coming up where people of the community get to come together and see and speak their mind on what can be next with regard to renewable energy and how do we leave Whittier, and for that matter the region, in a better place when we're talking about electricity. We have to do these things. This is an important conversation. I myself like the idea of being able to walk to places. And so if we can get together as a community to talk about these and what that means, the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear about uptown building is, will we have stations for cars that are not using gas to be able to recharge? This is a very good question. We have to, of course, look at these issues, and I am a person in the community and am very in favor of having people come together and talking about these. I'm a professor. I want a whiteboard and I want ideas.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado.
To address, planetary issues and water conservancy, we just have to look very close to home. What we really need to look at here, guys, is that we have water rates here that are charge you 80% for connection charge and 20% for use. What does that mean? That you're probably paying the same amount of money for your water as someone that's filling up his pool, except that you're actually paying more of that subsidy for them to do that. If you want to conserve water, we need to change the plan of how we bill our residents, specifically low-income residents in District 1 that barely have enough, that even with them cutting back their water, they will not see a major significant reduction in their bill. We don't need to go ahead and talk to people to make that action happen. We know that's wrong, and yet we still continue with that policy. If elected, I know I have to work with a group of city council members that voted for this. What I want to go ahead and do is start working with them to actually undo this. Because if you want to start rewarding individuals for conserving water, you need to create a billing system that rewards that. It's that simple. On Sunday we had a candidates forum for people specifically living in District 1. And one thing they were very passionate about was, why am I paying $240 for my monthly water service bill if I've already cut my use by 40 to 50% and the bill clearly reflects that? This is not a path on the right direction. So as a city council member, I know I can't overturn this, but I will work with city council members currently on office to make sure we change that. We shouldn't be subsidizing individuals that consume more water. Thank you.
And Mr. Canales.
For the most part, I believe the three of us are in agreement on most of this, on the need for charging stations for rechargeable cars. I have issues with the water rate, but let me stick to the renewable energy and renewable water part of it. And during the mayoral portion of this forum, it was mentioned that for some reason we switched from the pay-as-you-use type of system for water rates, which would discourage people from wasting too much water. And I think that we should go back to that. And I would work with the other council members to see if there's any way we can go back to where you pay for only what you use to encourage conservation.
Okay, very good. Okay. And Carol, you have another question?
I do. How can the city provide more services and funding to aid in the transition of the homeless to permanent supportive housing?
For this, we will begin with Mr. Alvarado.
In order for the city to go ahead and provide more services, knowing that we're going into a deficit year, there's three things that need to happen and three possible sources. Either A, the city pays for it and it would have to reallocate resources that have already been reallocated. B, work at the state level with state and maybe possibly federal legislators to go ahead and work on, passing bills at that level of government to get funding where it wouldn't cost, the local government out of its own generic pool. Or C, tax the individuals that live here to subsidize free housing for the homeless. I'm personally a fan of the second. People work too hard in the city of Whittier for us to be tacking additional taxes. The middle income individuals in this city and in this country are really suffering from constant trying to pay the day-to-day. I think developing relationships with your state and federal legislators is going to be the key to get additional funding without impacting your, bottom line. I think, having those relationships are going to help you to move to the next step and get those type of fundings to bring back some of that housing here in Whittier. What I am a fan, though, and the one thing we don't speak of, is that everyone agrees that we do need housing for the homeless. The only thing I share with is that we also have to share the load of the services. I'm a firm believer that District 1 is bearing the brunt of that issue, and I think that the city needs to work together to share the load. If we do develop some of this type of housing, it does need to be allocated in a way where all cities contribute, not just a burden that District 1 has to bear.
Thank you. Mr. Canales.
The issue of the homeless and low-income families is one of the reasons I supported the Lincoln Plan, because the City Council had made a promise to subsidize housing for low-income families there. I read a report this morning, an agenda report from December 2013, that talked about the Whittier Daily News reporting on August 12, 2012, that Whittier was going to eliminate homelessness within the next 4 years. Well, that would be 2016, which we're in now. And as you can see, homelessness has actually gotten worse, not been eliminated. During that time, we have thrown $5 million at this problem, but we currently have a $2 million deficit, so I don't think throwing any more money at it is going to help much. We do have a homeless symposium being led by a community leader by the name of Ted Knoll, who's been doing a good job of bringing people together. I'd like to see them bring more people together. For example, instead of just the city and nonprofits, let's bring the businesses into it. Let's bring local communities into it, the local residents into it. And I think that we, through collaboration through all parts of our city, working together on this, we can resolve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
This idea of homelessness is an extreme moral issue that everybody in a community has to deal with. There's not enough money to ever truly end it. This is an issue of time, talent, and treasure. And if we cannot find the treasure, and there's a lot of hard work. I actually am one of the founding members of the Whittier Consortium on Homelessness. And there are business people that are there. The Chamber is represented, the Uptown Whittier Association is represented, the community members are represented. We expected 40 people, 200 showed up. It's clear that people are interested. It was fantastic to see these people come together, church, nonprofit. We have to focus, yes, on money, but also one of the things that the consortium is looking at is this idea of talent. How do we get the people who are homeless to participate in a reciprocal relationship and connection with their community again? And in that, there's some supportive elements to that. We have got to find grants. There are people hard at work. It is incorrect to say that there's no money there. There is money, and they're trying to find more because the region has seen an increase, which means the money that we had 3 years ago is insufficient. We got to find the grants, and the way I would attack it is look at our homeless base. There are people who are veterans. We attack grants that are specific for veterans. We search for that money. We find those who we find the grants that are geared toward mental health and mental illness issues. And we train not just our police, but our business people, and we attack it as a community.
Thank you. And finally, we will hear from Faye Weber of AAUW.
In light of the current state of inaction on the Nellis site development, what would you propose to make the project into a more positive neighborhood, especially considering historical significance, public access, ease of access to schools, green space, and neighborhood services?
For this question, we will begin with Mr. Canales.
Okay. Well, actually, that's a misnomer. There's actually no inactivity at Canales because they're going through with the planning process, and there is a lawsuit going through also. And the reason for the lawsuit is because some corners had to be taken and cut during the environmental impact report because of pressure from the state and the timelines. Currently, somebody was quoted in the Daily News as saying that they expect building to start within the next 2 years. That would actually be incorrect, because when I went to the hearings, the developer said that they would need at least 5 to 6 years to complete the process, and they're currently in the process of removing arsenic and lead from the property, which you have to do if you're going to build homes there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
You know, the Canales property has been laying dormant since 2003, and my understanding, and I am not privy to all of the talk and the contracts, but here's what I know: it's a state property that was sold to a private company. So, like my peer here, I find there's an issue with that question, and is that what can we legally do? I'm a rule of law person. And if we are talking about intervening with an existing contract, well, first-year law school student will tell you that's a problem. If the question behind the question is, what is my philosophy behind building and history, you hold on to your history as much as you can. And there's a line for that. We all run our personal budgets, we know. There are some things I'd love to keep, and if it can't be kept, then I do what I need to do to keep that legacy going on. Our heritage isn't stuck to an artifact. However, we're saving a lot of buildings. If we get community input, and the goal is consensus building, and my understanding, going back to read what I can, that there was some consensus building, because I believe there was supposed to be only 2 buildings originally saved, and got it to 4. Would I love to save all 8? Of course. Of course. My philosophy is you get input from the people. You bring them in.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado.
You know, the reason why that this issue is technically a missed opportunity in my book is because there was community input that was provided and that was not listened to. In regards to the rule of law, the City of Whittier does control the variances it issues when it decides not to include a certain amount of legally required green space. Now, what did they do? The city went ahead and said, okay, developer, I will go ahead and grant you the waiver to this rule that we have for the entire City of Whittier on the condition that you pay the fee, because that's what they're supposed to do. They can waive that requirement by getting a variance and paying a fee to use that money for city funds. What was that money done with? They gave it back to the developer. So when someone talks about the rule of law, is that we did have the rules in place for us to go ahead and require a certain amount of green space in this facility. I also know as a homeowner of a historic home, there's things I can't do to that house because it's more than 100 years old. The city requires me to go through a certain panel to protect the integrity of that home. How is it that as a private citizen, according to some of the comments that I've made, I don't have those rights to do whatever I want with that private property that I own? I look at Nellis as an opportunity to provide more green space, protect our heritage. There are some beautiful buildings on that site that I personally think are a must for the community. The 4 buildings that were selected are great, but I think the 5th one, the gymnasium, where someone, if you're going to develop that many people to live there, somewhere for children to play basketball is crucial instead of them skateboarding around uptown. I personally believe we have a lot of room for growth there, and if the success of the lawsuits open up the proposal process again, I will make sure that these issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is kind of a 2-part question, and you'll have less time to answer it than you did your intro, but we are going to 1-minute question and answers now. Why do you want to be on the City Council? And what have you done to be qualified for this position? What do you bring to the table as a candidate? And we'll begin with Mr. Gonzalez, go to Mr. Alvarado, and end with Mr. Canales.
As I've mentioned, my entire life, since I was 14 years old, has been about public service. I am the only person technically and professionally trained to make neutral decisions in the name of the people. That is my training. That is what I've done, and that is what I do. And as much as it frustrates my friends and families, I always do it from a neutral position. I bring to the table years of public service. I bring to the table the idea that myself is second. My processing is such that, number one, I may be wrong. Number two, what are the facts? Number three, what do the people want? I bring to the table the understanding of how governance works and the innovations that it can see. I was having a conversation the other day, and there's an app for the City of Whittier. Great innovation. But the first time I used it, it got bounced back to me because it said, sorry, you can't use this app for that. And it's a selection right there. In my mind, I knew exactly what happened in that city hall, and I bring that experience to the table to bring fixes to these issues.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Alvarado.
As the only homeowner on this panel, and as the only father on this panel, it matters what happens in my community. A lot of individuals will speak of professional experience, but what really matters is the personal. I've chose to make Whittier my home, and a lot of you here have done so as well. You want someone that's going to care for the city, not only for you, but for your children. Make sure they move the city forward in a way that not only protects green spaces, but also makes sure that it provides some kind of opportunities for all the citizens of Whittier. In regards to my experience, just like many parents out there, I've served on the PTA. I was so good at it that, when I lived in South Whittier, they actually included me in the South Whittier Parent Advisory Committee that advised the board. I've also been that guy that was the basketball coach back in Mayberry Park. So those are the things that really matter. Who's the one that's going to put their best foot forward to protect your kids, to help develop your kids, and help develop the families that you guys are choosing to have here in the city of Whittier? I think as the only candidate with the experience, both professional and personal, to lead the city, I'm the best qualified to lead District 1.
Thank you. Mr. Canales.
Okay. Well, I believe that coming from a low-income family and having experienced homelessness myself, I'm in a unique position to help the community deal with that issue and find approaches to it to resolve it. I'm also, as the only veteran running for City Council at this time, I'm also in a good position as far as addressing veterans' issues, particularly veterans' housing issues and veterans seeking jobs. I am aware of someone who's been looking for work. I am also in the position of knowing what the process is and understanding what families are going through today. I've had 9 years in the military, and during that time, since then, I've managed and supervised over 5,000 employees. So I'm here to be an ally to everybody and to help bring about an age of collaboration in our city and our community.
Okay, thank you. You are all running for district representative from District 1. Did you support the creation of districts in the city of Whittier? And would you share your ties to the District 1 community? And we'll begin with Mr. Alvarado, go to Mr. Canales, and end with Mr. Gonzalez.
I personally thought that the redistricting was something that on the step forward. There's many cities in the state of California that have already moved in that direction due to low voter turnout and low representation from low-income communities. The beautiful part to this is that I got to meet, once I decided to run, I got to meet a lot of great individuals that were part of that fight, that are leading the fight, that actually pressured the city through a lawsuit to redistrict. And out of all the candidates that are sitting here, I can genuinely and honestly say I've received their endorsement. The Whittier Latino Coalition, along with its members, have been very crucial to make sure that us three get to sit here today. Because without them, this wouldn't have happened. And you got to make sure that you remember that, because anyone that says that they're either for or against it has to start with the people that made it possible. And I made sure that I went up to them and asked them for their blessing prior to even considering to run. And the reason why I received their endorsement was because they understood I'm not doing this for financial gain. I am actually taking a yearly income loss to do this. And you want to know why I'm doing it? Because I care about my neighbors and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Canales.
I was actually in favor of the districts. In fact, I wanted them back in the 90s, the last two times I ran, because I did so well in this area at that time. And it was brought up that we have districts now because of an election, but we have to remember that we would not have had that election if someone had not stood up and talked to the city council, and with the city council not making any movements on it, filing a lawsuit to get the city council, persuade them to put this matter on the ballot.
Thank you.
I think
And
it's
Mr.
wi-
Gonzalez.
Thank you. I think it's widely known that I brought a very important caveat that's supported not just by ideas or outside folks, but by social science. You have a city that is under 120 to 100,000, you run a risk, a higher risk, it's been indicated, it's been demonstrated, of siloing. That is when you have groups that start to fight. That's a problem, and I'm glad I'm not running for mayor, because that person gets to deal with making sure that doesn't happen with the council. As far as my ties to the community, I came to Whittier to plant a 501c3. I was on that executive board. It was successfully planted. We serve the people of Uptown. We serve the people of all of Whittier. I also sit on the YMCA board, and I spend a lot of time in Uptown, at the Uptown location, where a lot of our students, the young people that come in there, are from District 1. And I also serve as a mentor through the LA County Probation Department to Whittier High School. So I'm on the campus very frequently. I am part of this community. I have invested in this community, and I will continue to do so.
Thank you. Okay, this next question deals with District 1 specifically. What unique challenges affect District 1? And what is your plan to address those issues and improve the quality of life for residents in District 1? And for this one, we will begin with Mr. Canales and work our way down to Mr. Alvarado.
Okay. I believe there are three primary issues affecting this district. One is jobs, two is affordable housing, and three is public safety. Now, our city council has done a great job of bringing new businesses to our community, and they are to be applauded for that, because those new businesses have, if it wasn't for them bringing in new tax revenue, we'd have a much bigger deficit. Unfortunately, many of those new businesses have not been hiring local residents. So we need to work on that. And my proposal for that is to work with the Uptown Association and the Whittier Chamber of Commerce to develop a job training program and a job placement center. Affordable housing, we have a lot of poor, and as has been noted, we have a lot of homeless, not because they're being sent here, but because they're being attracted here by the social services. Public safety, well, gangs haven't been a problem because the injunction has done a great job, but we still have issues with people speeding down our residential streets, such as Pickering, for example, which seems to have an accident every couple of weeks.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
What I see is very important in District 1 is public safety. There are two things that I've heard while I'm out there and what I've experienced. The police are taking too long to get to me, that sort of thing. What I'm not hearing is forget the police or any other expletive you could put in there, which to me, as a person who studied this and who has delivered these services, I am ecstatic, because that means they want the police. And that can be changed. That's relational. And I can do that. I've done that. I'm the only candidate up here who has built community, not only in a small portion, but citywide. I'm the only candidate who has experience in creating very strong police-community relations. That is not easy. But what I'm hearing in District 1 is that it can happen. The other thing I want to know, very practical, why are some of our restrooms locked in our parks? We have the most parks in District 1, and we should be utilizing them even more.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado.
You know, when it comes to District 1, one thing we need to remember is that we have not been served in a very long time for many of the normal services that the rest of Whittier enjoys. I think the lack of representation speaks key, and who you elect to represent you is also key. I don't see District 1 as a silo. I see it as my neighborhood. So one thing I want to make clear is that when we do address the issues of homelessness or do address the issues of security, that we do it in a way that is neighborhood driven. Individuals have already spoken on the ability to go ahead and, develop communities and, and make sure to bring people together for the sake of security, but yet they have not done it even though they lived in District 1. I'm going to go ahead and let you know on a little secret here. When it comes to what the priorities are of District 1, I've always been the same kind of mindset. You work with the community groups that already exist, and I think I'm the only candidate that has reached out to the Whittier Voters Coalition, that has reached out to the Whittier Latino Coalition, and other various groups to ask not only for their support, but their endorsement. Just know that with that type of leadership, that's how you start improving your neighborhoods, by working with the community groups that already exist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This question deals with environmental situation in Whittier. The Porter Ranch gas leak has highlighted very real problems of oil and gas production in urban areas. The incumbents on the council supported the Matrix Oil project because of the revenue potential for the city. If you had been on the council, would you have made the same decision to reopen the oil wells in the hills? And we will begin with Mr. Gonzalez, go to Mr. Alvarado, and end with Mr. Canales.
And just to clarify the question, we're hypothesizing make-believe if we were there?
Yes, if you had been on the council 6 years ago.
Most of us who got here in a vehicle understand this very simple idea. There's risk in everything, absolutely everything. We have lulled ourselves into believing that through science we can mitigate that risk almost 100%. And I recognize that is not true. I'm not, well, let me put it this way. It's very simple. If there is risk, and it's going to pollute and it's going to cause harm, of course you don't do it any more than you would drive on the wrong side of the road. It's that simple. We all drive cars that run by explosions, and we mitigate that risk. If we can mitigate a risk and have policies and ideas to address issues that come up, then maybe. But this is not an easy answer. And either any of us in here who operate a vehicle understand we try to mitigate the risk. And if you can, good. If you can't, you don't do it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Alvarado.
To give you the clearest answer, my vote would have been no. I have educated myself enough to understand that water and the water where we draw the water for our city comes from those hills. Why would we expose it to the possibility of poisoning that supply through fracking? Science has already proven this. This is no longer a debate, it's a fact. And I think now that oil prices have plummeted, if you look at the global perspective, now that Iran's going to come in and with their embargo removed, more oil supply is going to come in into the market, you'll understand that that decision was wrong. There is no higher revenue. There is no longer a shorter supply or a need for oil. There's too much oil in the market. And see, this is where the experience of someone that understands the global picture and has the business mindset can tell you the difference of what is the priority for the city and what the overall projections are going to be for the entire world within the next few years. I think that was the wrong choice, flat out. Because if you're going to ask me to either walk and and have good clean water, or drive my car but have poisoned water, I think that's a no-brainer for me. The answer would be no for me.
Mr. Canales.
No, I would not. And let me just be straightforward about that. I would not have approved this, and for 3 reasons. 1, it's never a good idea to count your eggs before they're hatched. 2, it was a clear violation of Proposition A, and as such was illegal. The law is the law, and we are a land of nations, and our community is a community of law. And 3, from my experience in the military and in security, this installation would have put a big target on the community's back. With a nuclear perspective, with our Cold War with Russia, guess what? We're pointing our missiles at each other now. And guess what? Oil fields, those are nuclear targets. Not only are they nuclear targets, but they're also targets for terrorism because it's infrastructure. And that's the kind of site that a terrorist would go after. So no, I would not have approved this project.
Thank you. Okay, there are two parts to this. The first one is very simple and quick. The second one involves process. So, first, how long have you lived in District 1? And second, how do you plan to reach out to and engage with the underserved communities in District 1? And for this, we'll begin with Mr. Alvarado.
I purchased my home in District 1 about 2 years ago. And interestingly enough, the beautiful thing about choosing to live in District 1 is that, you know what, I'm right next to the high school. I have great neighbors and friends, and the community has potential to improve. Could I have afforded a house on the nicer side of Whittier? Yes. Did I choose to live there? No. I'm not a renter. I chose to live here and enjoy the privilege of having John Greenleaf Whittier, as small of a park as it may be, and with their locked restrooms. I chose to live here. I think that, you know what, moving forward, I can help. I genuinely can help move this side of Whittier to a better side of Whittier. I see the standards that other parts of Whittier have, District 3, District 2. We need to bring District 1 to those same standards. And I think that, like everyone here knows that has lived in District 1 and has chosen to live there, not just for political gain, we have room to grow. And I think if you elect someone to represent District 1, you have to make sure they're there for the long haul. I've already made the long-term investment for 30 years to be there. I don't think the rest of the candidates have done the same.
Thank you. Mr. Canales.
Well, how do I follow that up?
By being
Well-
truthful.
Well, obviously, I was Presbyterians in District 1, so I've been in District 1 since I was born, except for those times I moved around, attended East Whittier Middle School, for example. I've lived in District 1 since at least, continuously since at least 1989. Before that, if you want to count prior times, I would say since from 1973 to 1980. And that's been a long time. And it was my home address when I was in the military, was in District 1. As far as how do I reach out to those who are unfortunate, like I was, it's pretty simple. I mean, I can go to meetings of different community groups, which I do, but I find that the best method that works for me is I'm always out there. I'm always willing to talk to people. And I knock on doors, and I ask them, how are you doing today? Do you have anything that's concerning you about this community? That's how I do it.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
I've lived in District 1 for just over a year, and this was right before the lines were drawn, and I had no idea really where I was going to be. And I'm a very transparent person, so since it's been called to the table, there are two people I can call up right now and will attest that the home that I was living in Whittier, and I chose Whittier, had to be taken back in a matter of 2 weeks by the original owners. Owners who are planted in this community, who are friends who welcomed me to this community, who are business owners in this community, and they said, you have to go. So I went, and I, with my salary, since we're talking about renters, I rented. And there's great people who rented. We did for many, many years. My dream, of course, like many people in District 1, is to own a house. That will happen. And I don't plan on leaving Whittier. I've got a 501c3 here. I've got family who has moved to Whittier. So how do I stay connected? Well, there's a member of the Whittier Latino Coalition I reached out to, and there was no return call to me. Everyone knows where to find me at Coffee Bean. Everyone knows where to find me at the YMCA. I'm already there. You can find me at the main market talking to Miguel. I'm here,
Okay.
not just because I'm a renter, but because I'm a Whittierite.
Thank you. Okay, the City of Whittier has one of the higher permit fees for rooftop solar installations. Some cities have no permit fees for solar. Would you work to eliminate this fee to encourage more solar installations in Whittier? And we're back to Mr. Canales.
Simple answer is yes, I would. I would actually work with the other four members of the council and our mayor to see about reducing those fees, and I'm sure that we can, and if there's a shortfall as a result, we can probably cover it from other sources.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
The answer is yes. You don't have fees just to have fees. If there is a particular amount that has to be covered and there's an interest that the community has and the city has an interest, then the fee needs to be appropriate. You don't have something that costs $2 and then you say it's going to be $35. We're not a business. We're a community. This is local government, and two big, huge number one differences between budgeting and public and the private industry business is that we don't have a profit margin, and we don't have a profit motive. And when that starts to sneak up, that alarms me. We should not be charging fees for the sake of charging fees.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alvarado.
I think it's something that plagues Whittier significantly when it comes to taxing or charging some type of setup or startup or setup fees for rooftop solar installations. But it doesn't just stop there. If I wanted to go ahead and change my windows to energy efficient windows to make my home more efficient, it's going to cost me $1,000 just to get the city to go ahead and look at them to see if they're approved. And when you add the layers on top of that I have to go through an advisory board that wants to protect the look and feel of my home, I'm willing to do all of that. But I think as a homeowner, and even for renters, for your landlords to go ahead and update these things and add these things to their property, the city has to do its part by reducing those fees. And in order to do that, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We're really making steps to protect our planet. I understand that we have revenue and need to balance our budget, but it should never be at the expense of protecting our planet. So I'm for reducing both of those fees, not just the solar installation one.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll rerun a question that was asked during the mayoral forum. What is your opinion about the timing of the Whittier city elections? And do you think that, what do you think would happen if the city were to decide to move their elections from April to either the even or the odd November? And we will begin with Mr. Gonzalez, go to Mr. Canales, and end with Mr. Alvarado. So we're going to switch around a little bit.
I was presented with some data, some information about that voter behavior. First, we have important dates as a culture, right? We have important dates. You put them in your calendar and you go. However, the data that I was given seems to indicate that there's an expectation that if we consolidate, then we can have an increase in voter. If there's information to that, I'm data-driven. We move it. If there's information to that, of course you move it. However, voter behavior is extremely complex. I don't pretend to be an expert in it, but I'll tell you it has race and color and creed and all that sort of thing is but one factor. One factor. We will probably see an uptick of modest percentages, and then it may go back down. I would like to see more people on board. The fact that only 380 to 400 people in District 1 vote, or the area that is now District 1 vote, it's ridiculous. That's an issue that we all have to be concerned about. And I did sit here and I told the City Council, it's our job as community members to look left and look right and say, why aren't you voting, neighbor? Why aren't you voting, mom? Why aren't you voting, sister?
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Canales.
And truth be told, there is absolutely no data that says it would change either way. I mean, there's no data that says that it will change, but there's no data, at the same time, there's no data that says that it won't increase turnout. Two things that I do know that the data shows do have a positive effect on turnout are term limits and independent redistricting commissions. And so I would focus on those. As far as changing the date, it is possible that we may end up changing the date anyways because, as is noted during the mayoral forum, the state is having a law that they're debating right now, which would require cities to change their dates to November if they get below a certain percentage. And the reason that we'd want to put that in the hands of the state is because, one, for us to do it, we have to have a referendum, which is hard to do. And two, the County of Los Angeles said they would not consolidate if we were to do it on our own, but if the state were to do it, they'd have no choice but to consolidate it with the other elections.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Alvarado.
Unlike the other candidates that are here, I have worked at the Registrar Recorder County Clerk's office. So I do get to see the difference between voter turnout in an off-year election during a May, April, June primary presidential. And it's because I used to work till 5 or probably even 7 in the morning the next day helping count those ballots. So believe me when I tell you that the difference between me going home at 11, 12 o'clock at night when it was on an April month election or the elections that are in November or primaries and me going home at 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, it's because I know that people vote in higher turnouts in November elections. If elected, I promise to support any efforts to help move it, regardless of what referendums would be needed, because if this is the will of the people, give them the choice. Don't arbitrarily make it for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in this era of climate change and drought, how would you propose to get Whittier to become more sustainable in both energy and water?
Didn't you ask that already?
Did we did something of that. We can talk about, let me see if I can, okay. Do you have ideas for how to complete the Greenway Trail to the San Gabriel River Trail? Would that be something that would be of interest to you? And if so, what might be done? And we will begin with Mr. Alvarado and work our way this way.
I'm a big fan of extending that Greenway Trail all the way to the riverbed over there off by the 605. And the reason why I'm a big fan of it is because we've noticed an exponential growth of people that actually use it within the city. And it's allowed us to connect parts of the city that normally were isolated from each other. I think the best decision that, the city council members have done recently that actually helped that traffic in District 1 was to build the dog park there. And hearing the mayoral candidates actually mention that there's possibility of extending it and not having to cost the city much money by tapping into the MTA, by tapping maybe to state and federal collaborations. We have to remember, in order for us to get that Greenway Trail initially, we had to work with the Linda Sanchez. We had to work with the Ian Calderons of the world that represent us on the state and federal level. I give you my commitment that not only will I work to expand that Greenway Trail, but develop those relationships further to make sure it comes out of other sources of money and not only the city of Whittier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
One of the things that we were looking at recently on transportation, I think transportation is the key for this for a couple of reasons. When we can make an argument that it's not just a greenway trail, that it's actually a mode of transportation and a method of building community, we do have the ability to request funds that would not have been thought of in that way. So of course you need to look at it, and I think the key is going to be regional. Yes, we represent District 1. Yes, we should all represent the city of Whittier, but we've got a regional consideration. And if we can connect others to us, then we can do that, and we should do that, and we find money. I think the key is transportation, and then ask the feds for as much money as they can get us, as long as we can make that rationale that this is a transportation issue.
Thank you. Mr. Canales.
Our current council has been doing an excellent job as far as working on the expansion of the Greenway Trail towards La Mirada. But while we're working on that, we should also start planning on expanding it to the 605, as my colleague has mentioned, which I'd also support. And this is going to be a collaborative effort with our community and with our neighbors in the other cities around us, as well as with our state and federal representatives so that we can get the funding for it.
Okay, thank you. This question asks, how do you propose to reach out to low propensity voters and Spanish-speaking voters? And we'll begin with Mr. Gonzalez, go to Mr. Canales, and end with Mr. Alvarado.
The same way I reached out when we launched the 501c3, the same way I reached out when I tried to get people on board and say, hey, they've got districting coming, you should pay attention. You go out and you talk to them. I'm already in the community. well, you don't speak Spanish. Here's an issue with that argument. It relies on a racist rationale. It relies on the idea that because you can't speak to me, you have nothing to offer me, which if you go back far enough in history, that's actually what some of the Latino advocates were fighting against. I don't speak Spanish. That doesn't mean I can't communicate. I've been giving very good public service for many years. You get interpreters. When someone looks at me and says, I don't understand you, I find a friend and I say, this is together, we got to make this happen. So that's not a barrier. It is something to consider. So you go out and you go into the community and you door knock. I'm very comfortable door knocking. I've done it. I worked out in the field for a very long time. So you connect with people where they are, just like when we launched the 501c3. You let them know you're open to talking and you actually do it.
Thank you. Mr. Canales and then Mr. Alvarado.
I don't know. Well, the way I go about it is the same way I go about approaching any other group and working with them. I engage in conversations easily with people. And it doesn't really matter what the language is, because let me tell you about my experience. When I was in the military, I was stationed in South Korea. There's not many people over there that speak English. I mean, it's taught in the schools, but when you're over there, there's a lot who speak only Korean. I was always able to work with them. I didn't have to speak Korean. When I was stationed in Iraq for 1 year, I worked with people who spoke Iraqi. In fact, I trained Iraqis on how to use effective communications methods so they can communicate with each other to start winning their battles. I didn't know Iraqi, I didn't know Iranian, but I worked with Iranians over there too. I also worked with Hispanics in the workplace, and we always got things done. Speaking a specific language is not necessary to bring a community together. All you need to do is the willingness to work together, a willingness to collaborate across those lines.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado.
I'm totally opposed to what the comments that were just made right now. In order for you to understand the District 1, you have to remember 85% of that population is Latino, and a good majority of them are immigrants. And a lot of them choose not to participate for the sheer fact that they have to go through the extra hurdle of, to Mr. Gonzalez's point, for him to find a translator before they can actually legitimately be heard. And I understand that not all of us were brought up to learn Spanish. I was, and I'm proud of it. So the next step would be to hire a translator if I didn't know Spanish. But you know what? I also put my money where my mouth is. To answer your question of how would I reach out to voters to increase voter turnouts for Spanish-speaking people, take a look at my literature. I'm the only candidate that's investing my own hard time, money, and efforts to make sure that every piece that goes out is in English and in Spanish. If you want to increase voter turnout in this district, you need to make sure you speak to them in any language that they require you or ask of you. Because I get it. In order for people to really turn out, they need to feel invested. They need to feel like they're part of the process. The only way people can do that, like they said, they may not be able to speak the language, but they can sure make the time to go ahead and translate all the pieces that they have like I've done, and make sure you include them in the process. Thank you.
Okay, we have now come to the part of our forum where each candidate is given a 2-minute opportunity to make some closing statements and appeal to you, the voters. We will do this in reverse order of our opening statements. So the first speaker in closing statements will be Josue Alvarado.
You know, a lot of individuals are speaking on data here. So let me go ahead and provide a little bit of information of District 1. District 1, like I had mentioned, is 85% Latino. On top of that, you have to remember that the district is also 50% Democrat, 20% Republican, and 30% decline to state and all that other stuff. We need to look at this part of Whittier as very unique, and because it hasn't really ever had a leader in that community that can speak the language, that can really speak to their needs and address the issues that they have, this is a unique opportunity for you to choose someone that can meet those requirements in abundance. I think what I have going on, and you know that maybe the other candidates do not, is that I'm almost a mirror image of those individuals that are there. Come from immigrant parents, have actually been living the American dream for a few years now once I got my education. You know, I strive to move forward and make sure that I'm not only hardworking, but push those values to my children. A lot of individuals that live in District 1 are doing the same thing every day and understand those struggles. I think what I bring uniquely to this table is that, one, when I say I'm going to represent all people that live in the city of Whittier, I'm doing just that. I'm making sure that I'm speaking to everyone to make sure that they are included in this process and don't need a second or third middle person to do so. I think when you elect Josue Alvarado, which is myself, you're going to get an individual that actually is going to deliver results. That's what I've been trained to do. That's what my job is. And being in a very interesting period of Whittier's history, you know, where we're possibly going into deficits, you need that skill set. We also need to make sure that if the goal of the city is to increase voter turnout, we work together to do that. This is the first election where you have seen not only mayoral candidates, but city council candidates really work hard to earn your vote. Make sure that you're voting for the right reasons and make sure that you understand that there is a lot at stake here. But you should really vote for someone that's going to represent you and your interests, not anybody else's. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from David Gonzalez.
Funny thing about representation is that there's only one angle that has been discussed here tonight, and you get into the understanding of what representation is in a democracy. It's more than just looking and sounding like the other person. We have the idea of interest representation, where you have to be the people's advocate, which I've always been. There's the idea of corporate representation, where you're the protector and you're the enforcer of the entire community. Every single event that I've had, there have been interpreters, because I know this about me. There's also been some funny conversations where I've attempted to speak the language that I did not get to learn, because the person who was supposed to teach it to me simply wasn't there. There's nothing wrong with not speaking the language. There's nothing wrong with renting. I know that I can lead this community. I've been a leader in this community already. I've led the teams who have brought community together. I've led the teams who have brought ideas and made them happen. This is what I have done, and my track record, personal, professional, vocational, are open to anybody, anytime. And I suggest you look at them, because a number of things that were said tonight are simply factually incorrect. Factually incorrect. When I'm elected, I will represent you, all of you. 85% Latino does not mean 85% illiterate. We have tons of homes that are multilingual in District 1, over the 50% mark, quite frankly. My job is to lead District 1. My job is to lead them to a safer place, to a place where they're coming together, regardless of the language that they speak, to community. My job is to make sure that the mayor listens to everybody. My job is to make sure that we are safe, the number one job of any local community. And if that means I drag the chief out to coffees with the councilman, then that's exactly what we do. My anchors are very, very simple: safety, connectedness, community, and growth. And I ask for your vote, because I am the better leader.
And last but not least, we will hear from Robert Canales.
Well, I guess it's obvious that I think I'm the best, otherwise I wouldn't be up here. I've lived in this city since the day I was born. I have been through many things, including the 1987 earthquake. I remember Yorkfield, where we used to have the 4th of July fireworks, and my family, most of the time we didn't have the money, so like many people, we had to watch it from outside. I have also ran for city council right out of high school, which I, again, don't recommend because it's kind of naive. And so since then, I've lived a little, gained some experience and some knowledge, and I'm in a better position. 9 years in the military positions me to address veterans' issues. I also have experience in marketing and public relations, because I think that one of the things that the city council gets in trouble for is they don't do a very good job of explaining why they're adopting the policies they're adopting, and I can help them with that. And we have to remember that whatever we do, we have 4 other people on the council that we have to work with, in addition to working with the business community, the education community, and our residents. This is a team effort. Even though we're having districts, there's a lot of things that affect all of us at the same time. For example, the need to replace our water mains, which are currently causing us to have a lot being sued because they're putting pollution into the rivers and waterways. That's something that we can only address as a city. Now, the city has a plan to address that over 40 years. That's too long. We can shorten that if we stepped forward and we work collectively on a bond measure to speed that process up. And if I'm elected, I will work with you, I'll work with the council members, and we will address every issue from jobs to affordable housing, and we will take care of the homeless issue. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all three of you for being here this evening and putting yourselves out to be questioned and to offer your thoughts and comments. We wish you all good luck, and I want to thank the audience for being here. It's very nice to have a city council chamber full of people who are really interested in learning more about the candidates who are seeking to serve the city of Whittier. I'd like to thank the league members who are here helping make this thing function, and AAUW for co-sponsoring with us and helping to advertise and participate in this evening's event, and especially the City of Whittier, because we really do appreciate being able to have our candidate forums in this facility, have them televised so that people within the community have an opportunity to hear what our candidates have to offer. And there's a possibility that in future we may be able to even get these things up on YouTube and other places. So my final pitch for the League of Women Voters, votersedge.org website. All three candidates have posted some information, and in the next week or so, we should be able to process and post everything that they would like to have you know about themselves. It's an excellent website for finding candidate information and being able to compare people when you can do it at 2 a.m. if you want to. So, thank you for being here. And the election is still 6 weeks away, but get out there, help your friends and neighbors to become better informed about these candidates, and please vote. We really want more than 12% voting in April. So thank you very much.